千里之行，始于足下。A journey of 1,000 miles begins beneath the feet. We now gather in the Tao to travel the journey together. Welcome to Tao Talks with Derek Lin, where we take a deep dive into the Tao Te Ching by Laozi. I would like to invite you to center your thoughts and direct your attention to this moment in time, to the here and now. To be fully present and mindfully aware as we all ready ourselves for this sacred process of the Tao. This, as I mentioned last time, is a chapter where correct interpretation is especially important. Now, the reason why is due to linguistic evolution since ancient times, 2,500 years ago. The meaning of this particular chapter is strongly tied to ancient concepts, not all of which have survived into popular usage in modern times. Therefore, a reading based on modern word definitions will be confusing to those who do not understand the ancient concepts. This definitely has had an effect on many English translations. Now, quite a few of them are done by looking up words in a Chinese English dictionary. When that is the case, because the modern definitions are different, it would appear to the translator, the non-native speaking translator, the untrained translator, as nonsensical, like the chapter doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I'll point out those places as we go through them in the chapter. And just a reminder, the title for this chapter, The Gray Congruence, 大顺章, those are the Chinese characters. The name Gray Congruence comes from the very last two characters of this chapter. Congruence, in this case, just means to be aligned with the Great Tao, to flow along with the Great Tao. Here's the chapter that we looked at last time, and we did our sectional analysis. Not a very long chapter. As you can see, we've got 15 lines. We were able to break down the 15 lines into 3 sections, as you can see here. And last time, we were able to get to the bottom of the first section. And the first section is where trouble starts immediately for the untrained translator. As you can see, it starts right off talking about how those who were adept at the Tao use the Tao to not make people brighter. And when people come across this, without reading the rest of the chapter to understand the overall meaning, they'll be puzzled. They'll be like, but why wouldn't you want to make people brighter? Wouldn't that be a very good thing? And then the third line has a character that in modern times means foolish. To make people foolish? Do you really mean that? Can that possibly be the way it sounds, that those who are adept at the Tao want to make fools out of people? Well, that's the other problem. It doesn't mean that at all. And we'll talk about that more. The meaning of this chapter becomes ever more obvious as we go into the chapter itself. Now, you may be wondering, well, if you were one such translator who's not a native speaker, who hasn't been trained, how would you handle it? Well, usually it's twisted beyond recognition, or some of these great concepts from ancient times are simply skipped altogether. So when you look at the other translations, I think you can probably identify those places once you understand exactly what the original really says. So then we're going to be exploring section 2 and 3 today. Section 2, very important, talks about being a thief of the state in line 7, and then a blessing of the state in line 9. So we're going to want to figure out exactly what that means, and then also how to apply those ideas to our lives. For now, though, let me kind of double down in my recap of the first section by expressly listing out the incorrect interpretation and then providing the correct interpretation. So those who missed the discussion last time will have a good foundation to follow the discussion this time. So I'm going to isolate the first 5 lines, as you can see here at the top of the slide. So the lines say, those of ancient times who were adept at the Tao used it not to make people brighter, but to keep them simple. The difficulty in governing people is due to their excessive cleverness. So this is when people, it depends on the sort of the integrity of the translator. If they're committed to translating the words accurately, but they don't know the original meaning, then it would come off looking quite odd. That the ancient rulers used the Tao to make people dumber, more stupid, more ignorant. So here is the wrong interpretation. We'll just go line by line. Historically, the rulers skillful in the Tao of ruling, line 2, did not allow people to think for themselves. Right away, a red flag should go off, right? You should see that, well, wait a minute. The ancient sages, the ancient rulers who were Tao-centric, they did not allow people to think for themselves? What's going on here? Line 3, they kept people ignorant and therefore easy to manipulate. Okay, so the warning should be even louder now. Like, well, this can't possibly be right, and yet it seems to be what the characters suggest. Line 4, the people will be difficult to control if they knew too much. Well, that's even kind of sinister, right? Fortunately, this is absolutely incorrect. And it's obvious in ancient times, 2,500 years ago, what Lao Tzu was saying, but due to the fluctuating evolution of linguistics, many of the words have changed subtly in meaning. So by now, in modern times, when we look at this, it is very easy to misunderstand. So let's talk about the correct interpretation. So that was incorrect. What would then be correct? So line 1, the wise rulers of ancient times. Okay, this part stays the same. These were the ones, these were the sages, the rulers who were adept at the Tao. They used the Tao, did not encourage people to be shrewd or calculating. Okay, well, that seems to make more sense than before. We don't want people to be shrewd. You know, we don't want them to be excessively calculating. Instead, they guided the people toward simplicity. Okay, so the character for foolish, in fact, is another way to talk about being simplified and streamlined in living one's life. Then, they knew people would make life difficult for themselves if they used cleverness against one another. This is the correct interpretation. How do I know it's the correct interpretation? 3 different ways. Number 1, all the ancient commentary that came out at around the same time and also in the centuries thereafter are completely the same, unified in interpreting this particular part of the chapter in this way. Number 2, the rest of the chapter can be interpreted as being very obviously supporting this interpretation. So you're going to see that more as we dig deeper into this chapter. And then number 3, other chapters in the Tao of Jing convey the exact same concepts. And therefore, the Tao of Jing itself is consistent throughout. The key to understanding why some people have trouble with this section is to realize that in the Tao perspective, intelligence isn't necessarily a good thing. Intelligence is a tool that can be used for good things, but can also be misused. So we can see that in the table that we went through last time. This is divided into intelligence and wisdom, where the bottom half, wisdom, that is always a positive thing that's going to bring goodness and joy, happiness into life. Whereas intelligence, well, it really depends. It could be good or bad. So in the column on the left-hand side, the kingdom, this is drawn from the chapter itself, where Lao Tzu is expressing what happens when you're using the negative kind of intelligence, and then what happens if you're able to move into positive wisdom. So for the kingdom, Lao Tzu's remark talked about how intelligence can manifest as excessive cleverness. And this can be done by the ruler, can also be done by the people, and indeed, they kind of give rise to one another. When the government is trying to be clever, trying to make things more complicated, more tricky for the people react by seeking loopholes in the laws to exploit. They use cleverness against one another in the context of scams. And all of these make the country or the kingdom difficult to govern. So this is the remark from Lao Tzu, which, as you know, we always apply that to life, treating your life as your private kingdom. And when you rule your kingdom, excessive cleverness, the negative kind of intelligence, will show up as shrewdness, and excessive calculations, over analysis, overthinking. Now this is going to show up in your life as maybe looking for shortcuts. You know, what is a quick way for me to gain an edge over other people? It shows up as overthinking, analysis paralysis. It shows up as too much complexity, too much clutter. Like I need to acquire, I need to gain, I need more. So all of these result in difficulties in life, difficulties that are really not necessary, that you can easily bypass by living life in a better way, a way that is more Tao-centric. Now remember, the example that we used last time for tools that can be used or misused was a hammer. A hammer can do useful work, but you can also use it to hurt someone. So I think that's easy to grasp. Now let's take a look at the wisdom part, the bottom part. So what Lao Tzu says is that the ruler, if they really understood the Tao, what they would do is to guide people towards simplicity, to be honest, to be direct, not resort to cleverness to try to get around laws and regulations. And the rulers themselves should adhere to the basics of governing. With simplicity, honesty, and directness on the part of the ruler and the people, the kingdom itself is easy to govern. Everything flows smoothly. That's the Great Congruence. And as a result, the kingdom becomes peaceful, powerful, and everybody enjoys prosperity. So we apply that to life as well. We go from the kingdom to your life. It also means as you run your life, manage your life, rule your life, you also want to utilize the principles of simplicity. You want to be honest with yourself. You want to have integrity with others. And it's better to be direct. So this is adhering to the basics of cultivation, the fundamentals, the work that should happen every day, the contemplation, the reading, perhaps this meeting. Now, the results that you see from that cultivation should be that life becomes easy and smooth. You become more spiritually powerful. So that is how we map from one to the other. Now, this is just a very quick recap of what we talked about last time, and it builds the foundation we need to understand Section 2. Section 2 makes it easy to understand Section 1. The beginning of Section 2 is line 6. Line 6 says, therefore, using cleverness to govern the state, and then it goes on, is being a thief of the state. So we'll talk about that line 7 in just a moment. Let's figure out this line. The character in the middle, the third character, 智, usually that's translated as intelligence, like mental brilliance or smarts. So the puzzling part, as I mentioned, is that people wonder, why wouldn't you want to be smart? Why would you not want to be intelligent, mentally brilliant? So by changing it to the word cleverness, we get closer to the original intent of what Lao Tzu was trying to convey. He meant to say that if you try to be too clever, you make everything more complicated. So this means for the kingdom, excessive rules and regulations. You try to do too much. You try to stay ahead of the people who would cheat the system. And people respond with cleverness to evade or hide. It becomes like a game of leapfrog. I'm going to pass these rules and regulations to restrict you. And then the people figure out new ways to get around them. So what about for us? For oneself, this can mean a messy life full of clutter. So just like the kingdom is cluttered up with excessive rules and regulations, you can be cluttered up with mental and physical clutter. It can also mean a tendency to meddle or interfere. So rules and regulations are ways, when they're excessive, they interfere with the lives of the people. When you have too much mental clutter, and usually what happens is that people set aside their own business and they interfere or meddle in other people's business. So this results in even more complexities in your personal relationships. People resent the interference. They try to avoid you. They evade or hide. And then you try to get around the evasive maneuvers and then interfere even more. So in this way, you become your own worst enemy. And it can definitely manifest in other ways as well. So for instance, I find that many of the people I know who are very intelligent, but who do not yet understand the Tao, when they do things that they know they should not do, they become very skillful at finding excuses for themselves. And they're using their intelligence against themselves in that negative way. So they're finding excuses to avoid doing what they know they should be doing. And in the end, it just causes them to not make the progress that they were hoping to make in life. And this is going toward the next line. The next line, line 7, is about being a thief of the state. Let's talk about what that means. So using cleverness to govern the states is being a thief of the states. Let's look at it from the kingdom perspective. Well, you can guess that people figure out ways, more and more ways to take more from society for personal gain. And they evade responsibilities, they contribute less. So overall, society is weakened as a result. And it looks like the overall effect is equivalent to there being a thief that has stolen from the kingdom. The kingdom ends up with less because everybody is going in a very egocentric way, very selfish motives, just for themselves. And then we want to take a look at how that applies to life as well. So in terms of life, what it means is that when you're using cleverness to govern your own life, you waste time and effort on various shortcuts. In Tao cultivation, we talk about the necessity of one step at a time. Walking this great journey, it's a gradual process. It was always meant to be. And if you're looking for shortcuts, no matter what it is in life, well, more often than not, you're going to find that the shortcuts don't really work long term. So shortcuts in cultivation, they never work. All these different schools of thought that claim to help you accelerate your spiritual cultivation, they don't work. More than that, the clutter in your life definitely keeps you from enjoying your life completely. The more clutter you have, the less you are able to enjoy your life as you were meant to. So that overall, your life is going to fall short, far short of what it can be. You definitely have not tapped into the potential of that life because of excessive cleverness. So the metaphor works because it is as if you have stolen from yourself. In this case, you are the kingdom and you are also the thief that has stolen from the kingdom. Stolen what? Well, stolen the joy that was rightfully yours. So what about the other way? The other way is to not use cleverness. And we'll talk about that next. But first, let me just point out that line 6 and 7 is making the point for us that these illustrate the reason why the first section should be interpreted exactly as we have talked about. That excessive cleverness, it actually robs you of that which you deserve, the joy in life. So the opposite approach, not using excessive cleverness, that would be the Tao. Not using cleverness to govern the state is being a blessing of the state. Let's talk about that. So not using cleverness, refrain from fancy or elaborate moves. For the kingdom, it means focusing on the basics. The basics for a kingdom include the infrastructure, and that's roads, bridges. These are the things that the ruler, would enable throughout the land. Not only that, the rule of law will keep everything orderly, preserve peace and society, and that allows for trade to take place. People can live and work in safety because security and protection have been provided. Peace is preserved. So what about for you and me? For oneself, this means a practical perspective. It is also sticking to the basics. It is also sticking to the fundamentals. It's like the expression, an honest day's work for an honest day's pay. It's just a very down-to-earth practical perspective, planting one foot before the other. It's a gradual, incremental process, cultivation in life. So this is what it means to not use cleverness, but use simplicity to govern the state that is your life. And the result is blessing. So here I want to talk about specifically the character for blessing. Fu. Pinyin is Fu. Fu. This is a commonly used character. The meaning for this character has not changed since ancient times. It is and was always meant to be a very positive thing. Prosperity, abundance, affluence, good fortune. And because of the positive nature of this character usually shows up in celebrations, festivities. So as an example, once you learn to recognize this character, you will see it all over the place, like for instance, Chinese New Year celebrations. And here's an example of that. So this elaborate, nice symmetrical design has the character Fu right in the center. So that is to emphasize its importance. This is a very nice piece. This is something that was made out of red paper, and it can be cut from one sheet of paper by someone who's skillful, with knife or scissors. Very intricate design. And this, as I said, this is a fixture in Chinese New Year celebrations. So this would be the opposite of thief in line 7. It is the opposite of thief in the sense that this is what adds joy rather than to take it away. The blessing is that which contributes to your life. This character is clear and unambiguous. There is no double meaning in the dictionary, in daily speech, ancient times, modern times. It is clear as a good thing. So how do we know Lao Tzu considered not using cleverness to be very good? Well, because of this character. This character sort of seals the deal. So being a blessing of the state, let's run through what that means for the ancient kingdom, and then after that, what that means for our modern lives. So in the kingdom, in the context of the kingdom, it just means that people can live and work in peace and safety. Because of simplicity, the fundamentals are being taken care of. And because everything is peaceful and everything is safe, people can be productive, they can contribute to society. Society, therefore, will prosper as a whole. And of course, now it makes sense that the overall effect is that this is a blessing for the kingdom. So the meaning is clear. Now, let's talk about the personal side. rather than to chase shiny objects. Shiny objects distract us, they tempt us, they can be very seductive. Rather than to chase after them, we walk the path. The path of the Tao is simplicity. It's a path where we do not accumulate more, but let go of what we don't need to preserve the essentials. It's about, as I mentioned, planting one foot in front of the other. Now, let me just be clear that the Tao is not a deity. It is not going to provide blessings in the style of religious figures. So we cannot, I think we probably all understand that we cannot ask the Tao, pray to the Tao for blessings. I mean, we could, it just doesn't do that much good unless you put action into it to go with the prayer. So when we talk about the blessing of the Tao, I think the meaning is clear. We're talking about blessing as a natural byproduct, like a side effect of doing things right, following nature as we were intended to. When that happens, there's purpose in your life, there's meaning, there's even a sense of mission. And I know that some of you listening to me over the years, you have definitely found all of the above. And, that's, I would say, more power to you. The truly happy are the people who feel that they have that mission in life. And when you feel that way, all the naysayers, all the critics, they fade in importance. They fade into the background. You don't even need to pay attention to them anymore. They have no effect on you. And life overall is easier and smoother. You feel great. Definitely, you can feel the effect that the Tao has on your life. Therefore, in a very real sense, you are enjoying the blessings of the Tao in your life. So that is what I mean by a blessing of the state. In this case, the state is the kingdom, that is your life. So let's now revisit the table that we looked at before. Mapping from the kingdom to your life. And let's bring in, this was the table that we did at the end of the first section. So as I mentioned, section 2 reinforces the message of section 1. And it's using a metaphor. It's using blessing of the state and thief of the state. So now we have a good way to substitute in that metaphoric language. So in the kingdom, that excessive cleverness is going to result in thief of the state because people are seeking to exploit. They are scamming one another. The ruler is trying to control them with ever more complicated means. Overall, definitely stealing a lot of resources, a lot of energy from the kingdom itself. So we map that to life. What happens when you have excessive shrewdness, looking for shortcuts, too much complexity, etc.? Well, you're being the thief. You are stealing your own joy from your own life. So that's how the metaphor works. And it's the same for the other side, the blessing side, the side of simplicity, the side of the Tao. So when you stick to the basics, when you are making sure the people are cared for, that they have everything they need to be productive and happy, you are bringing about a blessing of the state. 国之福. And you are able to map that to your life and find that, well, I may not be an ancient ruler, but I'm definitely the ruler of my life. And if I do everything in a simple and direct way, if I stick to the basics, yeah, I am going to enjoy the blessings of the Tao. So this is how we bring together section 2 with section 1. It's all about, for all of us, it's all about not overthinking what we ought to do, how we ought to feel. Instead, we should just follow the Tao rigorously. And I think also when we look at these examples, we talk about what they mean. As you observe, as you look around in your life, you can also see the people who are excessively clever. They don't necessarily get anywhere better or faster. They just make things more complicated for themselves. From the perspective of the Tao, it's kind of like the petty kind of intelligence. It's not true wisdom. Okay, so let's move on from section 2. We're now going to be getting into the next section. Starting with line 10. Know that these two are both standards. So keep in mind, these two refer to the thief and the blessing. Those are the two different approaches to ruling a kingdom. Hence, there are two different approaches for managing your life. So I want to highlight those two characters that you see at the end of line 10 and also at the end of line 11. You can tell they're the same characters repeated. 稽式. Here's the pinyin for that. I don't take a lot of time on these two characters because these are characters that are no longer used in modern times. So these are much more frequently used in ancient times than modern times. And the meaning, again, the linguistic evolution means that the meaning of these characters have drifted. Let's stick with the ancient meaning. That's the context. That's most important here. Now, they've been translated. These two characters have been translated as standards. The ancient meaning is that this will be like a methodology, a paradigm, something to be examined or scrutinized, to check, to understand, to inspect. And the point is that you want to understand what it is to be a thief and what it is to be a blessing. So both should be studied. The thief is using cleverness for the quick fix or get an edge. So thief is a good metaphor for that because the thief is trying to steal something that does not rightfully belong to the thief. So it's the utilization of intelligence and cleverness in doing something that is a negative thing. And then the other way is not using cleverness. It means sticking to the basics. It's the tortoise in the race against the hare, where slow and steady wins the race. So now let's talk about understanding the two standards. So there's actually subtleties there, and it's important. Line 10. So as we talked about, the two different ways, the thief and the blessing, what Laozi observed 2,500 years ago is that the cleverness part is what many people do. He said it's what most people did, and that he alone was different because it is not the Tao. People being calculating, people being shrewd, that's true in ancient times as today. And what Laozi observed also was that using excessive cleverness can get you short-term benefits, but you can't get anything that lasts. So it's, in a sense, not real. It comes and goes. Now, the second way, sticking to the basics, people would find that to be rather, well, boring. It's plain. It's not exciting, but it is the Tao. It has its own joy and excitement, but it's much more subtle than the thrills of chasing after short-term profits. So that's the contrast between the two. And the point is that you gotta know both. You must understand both. It's important. Why is it important? So first of all, think of the two sides, the thief and blessing, as the two halves of yin and yang. Think of them as complementary pair of duality. And this has a number of implications. First of all, just like when you see one side of a coin, you automatically know there's the other side of the coin. The existence of one half of the complementary pair implies the existence of the other half, like the yin and yang symbol. Because of that, knowing one side is just partial understanding. It's incomplete. And the other point to be made, just like the yin and yang symbol, is that it's never cut and dry. It's never one or the other. It's never perfect. It's never pure. That one side of the yin and yang symbol is gonna contain elements from the other side. In the yin and yang symbol itself, it's that little dot that you see to represent that. So same thing here. Human beings are imperfect. You and I are not perfect. So when we follow the advice of Lao Tzu, it may not be 100%, and that's okay. I think that if you get above 90%, you're doing pretty good. If you can get to 99%, even better. There's no need to aim for the perfection of 100%. Real life is messy and may not allow for that kind of perfection. Line 12, mystic virtue. So this is what I mentioned as the most important concept out of this entire chapter. So let's dig into it and understand exactly what it means. The first thing to realize is that it is a virtue to choose the path that flows with the Tao. So when we talk about one path being the thief of state, the other one being the blessing of the state, it is a virtue to choose the path that brings you blessings. However, here's the important thing. If you only know that path and you don't know the other, you don't know everything about the other path that you are not choosing or rejecting, then it is actually ignorance. Choosing the good, that's a virtue, but because you know nothing else, it's not really a choice. It's choosing by default. So there's an element of ignorance there. The reason why this is less than optimal is because if you didn't know about the other choice that was available to you to be a thief, it may be tempting. You may be tempted if you know about the other side. And therefore, ideally, what you will want to do for yourself is to choose the path of the Tao because you know both, because of your total awareness. That is an exercise of your free will. It means you really know, really understand what you're doing. It's not just about choosing the Tao, the blessing, but also rejecting that which is not the Tao. It's an explicit rejection of that which is not the Tao. So this is the level above virtue, and that is why it is the mystic virtue. We call that the mystic virtue as a level beyond just virtuous. So if you live your life, let's apply this to our lives. If you live your life in a simple way, it is certainly in accordance with the Tao, so that's a virtue. But if you live that way because that's all you know, then it's ignorance. It's virtuous, but it is not at the level of mystic virtue. You're at the level of mystic virtue only if you know both and you make a conscious decision to choose the Tao. So overall, it means mystic virtue is about making a choice out of total, complete awareness and understanding, just to kind of summarize that. Now let's talk about the two standards. We've presented them as two standards, but also as two paradigms, two methodologies that we can follow in life. I want to depict them for you in a pictorial way in the next slide. So visually, you can see it right away. So ideally, we can capture the whole concept at a glance. Here, I want to start with the symbol, the yin and yang symbol that we have talked about. On the left-hand side, I'm meaning for this symbol right here to represent the Tao, the Great Tao. So keep in mind that the Great Tao is all-inclusive. The Great Tao encompasses all, any path, whether it's positive or negative. So the Great Tao includes the path of being a thief of the state and also the path about being a blessing of the state. So let's explore one of them first. So one part of it is what Lao Tzu talked about. Using cleverness to govern the state is being a thief of the state. So that's the line. And let's take a look at how that process unfolds. It's a process that looks like this. The ruler uses cleverness to rule the kingdom. And in response, the people use cleverness to counteract that, to contend with one another. So it is cleverness being used against the kingdom itself and also with everybody else in society. Naturally, the result of this is that while it becomes difficult to govern the kingdom, things are more complicated, the ruler has a tough time. Nothing is smooth and easy. Everything has a lot of obstacles. Therefore, reasonably, we can expect for there to be widespread chaos in society. That's the thief of the state. The chaos is the thief. So that's one path, one standard, one paradigm, one methodology is to utilize cleverness. And Lao Tzu, keep in mind, says that most people, this is how they run their lives. So let's explore the other path, which is the path of the Tao. So I'll have another arrow down here to depict that the bottom is where the other path will appear. So this is represented by the other line from Lao Tzu, not using cleverness to govern the state, which just means not using that excessive shrewdness, cleverness to run your own life. Then we have a different process that unfolds. It looks like this. So for the ruler, it is not using cleverness, but the principle of Wu Wei to rule the nation, to rule the kingdom. So that's about the Tao. The people are guided to the simplicity and joy of the Tao. That, listen, you're going to have a better time if you simplify your life. You can really enjoy your life. This means all levels of society fall in line naturally. And you can see how this corresponds with our lives. That if you are using Tao principles to manage your life, you are guiding yourself to the simplicity and joy of the Tao. Everything falls in line. Everything falls into place seemingly all by itself. It feels like you're getting all kinds of assistance from every direction. So for the kingdom, there's widespread prosperity in the kingdom. For your life, you're enjoying the blessing of the Tao. Okay? So these are the two paths. These are the two paradigms to be understood, to be examined. And one of them should be chosen, the path of the Tao. So I want to depict us as a silhouette of a human being on the right-hand side here, as you can see. So it is incumbent upon us to understand the negative path, the path that results in chaos, to know what will happen if we were to use excessive cleverness, if we were to make things more complicated. So that arrow points to understanding. And then we also want to understand the other path, the path that leads to joy. And I have a two-sided, two-way arrow at the bottom. The reason is because having understood both, I represent that as having the Tao in one's mind. That is, you understand all the choices that are available to you, and you're making the wise choice of picking the path that is consistent with the Tao. And therefore, the arrow goes in the other direction too. That is the path that you have chosen. So this right here, that two-way arrow, that understanding of the choices before you, that's actually mystic virtue being represented there. So I think this graphic makes that clear. You can see exactly how the process works. This is what Lao Tzu is trying to say. Now, he has more descriptions about mystic virtue. Let's explore them and understand exactly what he means by mystic virtue, all the implications. Now we're at line 13, which is all about describing mystic virtue. First, I want to cover the two characters for mystic virtue, 玄德. Yeah, these are two very cool characters, in my opinion. You see the pinyin there. Now the pinyin makes it difficult to sound it out in English because, you know, people will assume that this will be something like je, but it's actually just sh. So sounds like 玄德, as you see here. This is my way of denoting how it is supposed to sound. It is a little more intuitive, obvious when you look at this right here, 玄德, instead of the pinyin. And, you know, people will say, you know, Zan D or Zan Day, something like that. And that will be completely incorrect. Not the way it's supposed to sound. Let's break down the two characters as to meaning. This is actually important. 玄, the first character, it means mystic, mystical, mysterious, difficult to understand, the unknown. So here, I've got mystical in the translation, just mystic. That's totally fine. Now, in ancient times, it had two different definitions. One is exactly this right here, mystical. The other one is the color black, means darkness or blackness. And the two definitions were related in ancient times because when it is dark outside, when it's dark in the middle of the night, you can't see anything. And to be mystical and mysterious means you cannot see it clearly in your mind. When we say see, you know, like in English, we'll say, oh, I see. You're not saying that I visually see something. You're saying that I mentally understand something. Oh, I see what you mean. I see what you're talking about. To see something is related to understanding something. So it is the same in ancient China, where if you cannot see something, it is perhaps visual in the middle of the night, but it can also mean mentally, like I don't really understand. So that's why in ancient times, it had the meaning of darkness and blackness. That meaning is not often used in modern times, but it's going to impact some translations. They don't really know which definition to pick when they encounter this particular character in the Tao Te Ching. So in chapter 1 of the Tao Te Ching, it's talking about Xuan, and it's using the character twice. And therefore, many translations have things like darkness upon darkness. That's why. What chapter 1 was talking about was mysterious, like mystery of mysteries is the way that we would say it in English. And the second character there, De, well, that's the second character from the title, Tao De Jing. It just means virtue. Please note, it does not mean power. Power is a little bit of a mistranslation. When people want to make the Tao sound really cool, they're going to say that the Tao Te Ching is the book of the way and its power. Okay, well, it actually doesn't say that. It's the book of the way and virtue. Virtue can mean power, inherent power in something, even in English. Like when we say, by virtue of being present, I was able to witness the whole event. So virtue there is not human goodness, but it means by the power inherent in being present, I had that opportunity to witness something happening. So that's the context of power. Now, you would not, use virtue as being synonymous with power in English. You wouldn't say that, someone, maybe an athlete lifting a lot of weight, you would say the athlete is powerful. You would not say that the athlete is virtuous. Maybe the athlete is virtuous, who knows? But we don't use that as a synonym for strength or force. Therefore, that's the reason why I know it's very common, but when you see the Tao Te Ching translated as the book of the way and its power, that's just a very suboptimal rendering, and it's incorrect. So anyhow, back to Xuan De, putting the two together, mystic virtue is actually the closest possible rendition that one can have in English. I find that these two characters are oftentimes missing from many English renditions only because, this is troublesome, like people don't really understand what this is getting at. So they will gloss over it and hope people don't notice. Now, let me talk about this other character that you see. And you will see it at the end of, you see it in 3 iterations in line 13 and also line 14. This character, I also don't spend a whole lot of time talking about because, again, it is not something that is used in modern times. In ancient times, ancient Chinese had no concept of punctuation marks. For Chinese, it's a modern invention. So in ancient times, there are specialized characters like this one that serves the same function as punctuation marks today. This one specifically is the exclamation mark. And you will see in line 13 that the translation includes exclamation marks for that reason. And arguably, we could also put the exclamation mark at the end of line 14. That would also be accurate. Now let's talk about exactly the descriptions of mystic virtue. What does mystic, we talked about the meaning of mystic virtue. Now, what does it look like? What does it mean? How would someone be when that person is in possession of mystery virtue. By talking about that, it makes the concept more real. We can relate to it better. We start with profound. So here's the way that it looks from the perspective of Lao Tzu. Lao Tzu noted that those who possess mystery virtue are profound because they are the ones that have made a meaningful choice in choosing the Tao. And he starts with the opposite. He starts with the people that don't possess mystery virtue and therefore are not profound or deep thinkers. Lao Tzu noted and observed that shallow people tend to be impulsive. That is, their choices are based on impulse. They make choices based on a whim without knowing all the options. You know, oh, that feels good. I like that. I'll go with it. And oftentimes in life, impulsive people go through life making choices impulsively without knowing all the options that are available. One side effect is that they can feel as if they don't have a whole lot of options. It isn't true that they don't have a whole lot of options necessarily. It is definitely true that they haven't explored to figure out what all the options may be. So that results in the misconception or the illusion that they have limited options in life. This is actually important. We'll come back to it. And those who do possess mystery virtue, they think deeply about life. That's how they were able to understand the different options they had. That's how because they thought deeply, they understood what it meant to be a thief of state and what it meant to be a blessing. They fully understand the choices they make in life. So this is where being profound or being deep in terms of your thoughts, in terms of having depth to your character, that's how this plays into mystery virtue. In our lives, we also want to keep in mind, if we are like the people with depth to their character, then we too, we're going to always want to know what we're getting into. That's how we can make meaningful choices with clarity. So another way to say it is that we, as Tao cultivators, will want to choose the Tao, but only with profound understanding of the Tao. Yep, making sure exactly what we're getting into. Know exactly what we're accepting and rejecting. That's how the decision can be meaningful. Let's talk about the next description. As you can see in line 13, the one after profound is far-reaching. Let's explore that. And again, we're going to start out with the people who do not possess mystery virtue. These are the short-sighted people. They are not far-reaching. They are short-sighted. They have tunnel vision. They can only see what is in front of them. And because they cannot see that far ahead in their lives, they may feel trapped as a result. And let me also share with everyone, as I go through life and observe people around me, how they act, what they say, what they do, I find that the short-sighted people oftentimes are the ones who are most obsessed with knowing about the future, the fortune telling, the tarot cards, the astrology, etc. They can be so attached to it that it borders on obsession. And that's usually because they can't see that far ahead. The world is uncertain, the future is uncertain, and therefore they are desperate to gain a glimpse of the future. Hence the obsession with fortune telling. Those who possess mystery virtue are quite different. they look far into the future. This has a couple of different implications. The ones with mystic virtue, when they look into the future, they have a vision. Long-term vision, long-term goal. This is what I see for myself 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road. This is the kind of life that I'm going to lead. These are the choices that I have available. Not only do I see the choices, I also see far into the future where they would lead. Those that don't, they don't really have a choice in that they have to take the steps that are laid out for them. So this is something that I have experienced personally. So let me share something that's rather personal with everyone. Before I understood the Tao at a certain level, fortune telling worked out really well for me. Like, I was fortunate to encounter someone who was really good at fortune telling, who was able to forecast very accurately about what's going to happen in my life. Later on, when I understood the Tao at a certain level, those predictions started to fail. They went from 99% accurate to 0% accuracy. What happened? The ability of the oracle hasn't changed, but I've changed. I went from someone who was short-sighted, who had no choices in life, but to take the steps that are laid out for me, in front of me. That was my fate. That's what it means to be fated, to follow a particular destiny. You can't see that much. You can't see that far ahead. So you're just walking the path that you can see. And that's where the fortune tellers can predict what's going to happen to you, the really good ones. Now, when you have mystic virtue, and later on, I gained a level of understanding of the Tao, and I could say that because suddenly those predictions started to fail, and nothing came true. And it was because I could see my options, I could see my choices, I could see far into the future, and because of that, I could decide for myself where I wanted to go. It meant that I was actually becoming a master of my own destiny. I could create my destiny, my own personal destiny as I see fit. I knew what my choices meant in the long run, and I could make adjustments along the way. So this is one way to describe those who have mystic virtue, is that they have mastered their own destiny. And that is something that I want for everyone who is now listening to the sound of my voice. Now, let's go to the third description of mystic virtue. That's life 14. It goes opposite to material things. And here, material things comes from the second character in life 14. And then the third character means reverse or opposite. And then, of course, the last character there is the exclamation. So the observation from Laozi, similar to the other descriptions, the profound, the far-reaching, Laozi observed that most people go after materialistic things. This was true in ancient times. They're still true today in modern times. So when they do so, when they chase after materialistic things, a couple of things happen. One, some may fail. They fail to capture much in terms of materialistic wealth, so they remain poor. And some succeed in capturing some materialistic things. They acquire wealth, but that doesn't make them happy. They actually end up feeling rather empty. But they'll put up a good front. They'll put up a facade of happiness. Now, this is not the best approach to life, needless to say. So then, mystic virtue is opposite to this approach. Those who possess mystic virtue are not materialistic. Now, it doesn't mean that they are not successful by that metric. They don't need to chase after wealth, and yet they do very well. Well, how is that? Because they understand the Tao of affluence. They understand the Tao of prosperity, the Tao of giving, contributions, being charitable, being generous. They do very well without needing to chase after materialistic wealth. So by now, we have seen quite a few differences between those who possess mystic virtue and those who do not. And Lao Tzu will point out that most people do not. It is only the few, the special people, the Tao cultivators, the rare, who actually even know about this concept. And this is one of the reasons why I say interpretation is important. Understanding is important. Without accuracy, without authentic translation, there are many people out there who read commercially available translations and never come across this concept, never understand that this concept even exists. So now what I like to do, just to kind of further drive home this point, I want to present a comparison between those who have it and those who do not, and which Lao Tzu would say, well, that's most people. We're going to start out, we're going to go back a little bit and talk about the choosing a particular path, the path that is not the Tao, and the path that is. So most people not sure about their choices. They don't see them clearly. They don't know that there are paths that they can potentially choose. Those who do have mystic virtue, they know what the options are. And choosing that option consciously with full awareness, full understanding of the implications, choosing the Tao anyway, even though it seems unexciting, that's mystic virtue. So most people oftentimes feel their options are limited, that they don't have good options. When you have mystic virtue, it is as if a whole new world opens up, and therefore, to you, you feel like everything, every day is full of possibilities. Your life is full of possibilities. So these two, number 1 and 2, these are all about choosing from the paths, the thief or the blessing. Next, we're going to talk about shallowness versus being profound. Most people see only the surface level of anything, whereas those who possess mystic virtue will dive deeply into everything. So for all of us in this gathering, this is meant to be a deep dive into the Tao Te Ching. This gathering is consistent with mystic virtue. It is meant to be profound. Most people attach to appearance. This is like when we talk about, hey, judging a book by its cover. So the emphasis is on, how does it look? Emphasis on people is, how do they look? Are they beautiful? Are they ugly? You can tell this is very different for the people who possess mystic virtue. The perception is not on surface appearance, but the underlying essence. So it's not judging a book by its cover. It's not judging people by how they look, but about the content of their character. That's mystic virtue. Next, we're going to talk about looking only what's ahead of you versus looking far ahead into the future. Most people, short-term thinking. Those who possess mystic virtue, especially in the spiritual context, long-term vision and perspective. When you have long-term perspective, you stop caring so much about the pettiness in life. A lot of times we are PO, we're unhappy, annoyed, pissed off about the many irritations and frustrations in life. But if you have the long-term perspective of mystic virtue, your natural thought process is like, is this even going to matter to me 10 years from now? Am I even going to think about this on my deathbed? Like, seriously. In every case, I guarantee the answer is no, I'm not going to care about this. I'm not even going to remember this frustration or this annoyance 10 years from now. If that is the case, I'm just going to let go of it right now. That's mystic virtue. Now, because of short-term thinking, the people who are not able to look far into the future are naturally worried about the future. Hence, the obsession with fortune telling. Mystic virtue, it means that you now possess the ability to create the future that you want. You are the author of your own destiny. You create the blueprint of your own future. Number 7, most people, let's face it, let's be frank. Most people are interested in fame and fortune. Of course, we see this all the time. When you gain mystic virtue for yourself, when you attain that level, you definitely become much more interested in spiritual truths. And guess what? When you are following the mystic virtue in your life, you are well taken care of. All the goodness in life, in terms of the materialistic aspects, they follow automatically. They fall into place. They're a natural byproduct. Now, because most people are interested in fame and fortune, they are especially concerned about profit and loss. Like, if I do this, what's in it for me? If I invest in this, what is the return on my investment? Okay, they think in terms of dollars and cents, in those value versus loss considerations. Whereas those who possess mystic virtue are focusing not on profit and loss, but on service and giving. What can I contribute? How can I be of service to others, to society? So that is the difference between the two, between having mystic virtue and not having mystic virtue. So I think you can see all that I'm doing here with these 8 items is that I am spending 2 lines to paraphrase the description from Lao Tzu. That's all I'm doing. But there, I think we're making the difference quite clear, and I think it's easy to understand exactly what mystic virtue represents. So I see that we're getting to the top of the hour, so our meeting is coming to an end. We should now be jumping to the summary for today. Today, the summary is going to be all about chapter 65. Starting with what we had seen before, this is the summary that's talking about the metaphor of being a thief versus being a blessing. So as you saw previously, the negative type of intelligence, we call this excessive cleverness. Here, it's also showing up as calculating shrewdness. That negative type of intelligence is what leads to failure. Too much complexity, too much clutter, definitely stealing joy from your life. You're being a thief. Number 2, the other path, the path of the Tao, the wisdom of the Tao. And this is to stay on the path of cultivation without being tempted or distracted by the side paths, the shortcuts. The Tao is easy to walk. It's easy to make progress just one step at a time. And this is what brings blessings into your life. Now, let's talk about the stuff that we went through today. It's all going to work toward the last line, which is about the Gray Congruence, to flow with the Tao. That's what congruence means, is to be aligned with or flow with the Tao in the same direction as the Tao. It starts out with knowing the two choices, the thief or the blessing. So understand the yin and yang of life choices. That's where we start out. Then, remember, we want to choose the Tao path with awareness. I know exactly what I'm getting into. I know what the other path will lead to, and I know what this path will lead to. So out of that awareness, I make my choice, and it is a meaningful choice. That's when you begin to have this quality known as mystic virtue. And when you live with this mystic virtue, Lao Tzu says it means being profound. Look deeper into life. It means being farsighted. Look further into the future. It means not be attached or obsessed with materialistic things. That is, be liberated from the materialistic perspective. Okay, those are the descriptions of mystic virtue. And then the very last thing is to attain great congruence with the Tao. So this is the final lines that we're going to talk about next time. And then we're also going to be doing the paraphrase and the full circle. Our meeting has come to an end, but the journey continues on. Let us all travel safely so we can meet again. Until next time, may the Tao fill you with peace and happiness.